My name is Joe. If we haven't met yet, I'm so glad to be here with you all. Pastor Jules and Pastor Lonnie are out of the country. Pastor Lonnie's birthday, so they're in the Dominican Republic, having a great time. We sent chaperones with them. Keep an eye on them. Stay out of trouble. They're going to be back. But we're going to be here together today. I remember when I graduated from college. It took me a while. Not going to tell you how long. But I said, I'm never coming back. I'm done. Could have got a PhD. So when my friend asked me, hey, do you want to work at a school? I was like, no, I just got done with that. I ain't going back there. But he's talked to my wife because he's smart. He knows I listen to her. And so she mentioned it. Hey, what would you think if you, since she brought it up, I was like, I'll pray about it. It's all your fault. So as I prayed about it, I felt like God was opening my heart to go to be a part of this school. My friend was a principal. My wife was working there. We had a couple of people from our church working there as well. I was like, okay, I think something's happening here. Let me come in. I had worked with youth previously, not in the classroom, as like a speaker, 15, 20 minutes of like, and then I'm gone. I don't know what happened to you, but I'm gone. On to the next. But now I'm in a room full of kids, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. I'm looking at them. They're looking at me. I'm looking at them. I'm like, 15 minutes is up. I don't know what to do with the rest of the time we have here. One kid in particular, oh my gosh, I can still see his face. He was taller than everyone else because he was also older than everyone else. He had immigrated here. And sometimes they do that. I had friends who came here from Korea, and they just put you in a lower grade to help you transition into a new country. And so he was the oldest. He was the tallest, almost as tall as me. I was like an inch taller. So I always wore my Nikes every day. Make sure, show him who's boss. And he just always caused such a disruption in the class. So one day I pulled him aside, and I was like, hey, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that thing I did before where I motivate kids. I look in their eyes and say, I believe in you. And they go, you do? Right? And I was like, I see leadership in you. I think, and I was talking to him, and it took a couple minutes, and then I could see him kind of warming up a little bit, and I put my hand, I said, I need your help to lead this class. I can't do it without you. Let's do it. Let's lead this class. Take my hand. Takes my hand, we shake, and he says, okay, Mr. O. I was like, we did it. Nothing changed. Nothing changed. I actually thought that would change everything, but nothing changed. So I was stuck in this place called school. I would like stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning, lesson planning. I just should have lesson suggestions because, whatever I wanted to do, the kids wouldn't do it, right? Like I forgot to tell you that when I came in mid-year. They had 4 or 5 teachers previously. One was fired, and the rest quit. The most recent teacher had lasted maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then they quit. So I came into a room where the kids were running the show, and they were like, oh, we got you. But I was like, no. Like, I gave my word. You're stuck with me. I'm stuck here. We got to get through this, no matter what it takes. As we're going through our series, Whatever It Takes, I don't know about you, but when I hear whatever it takes, some of you are like, yes, tell me whatever it takes. I'm ready. I'm already all in, like Jordan. And then some of you are kind of like me. When you hear whatever it takes, you're like, oh, can't it be like you're doing great? Like, can't that be the sermon series? You're fine. But it's whatever it takes. But have you ever found yourself in a situation where, whether by your choice or not your choice, you don't know how to get through it? Whatever it takes. In the scriptures it says, therefore, in Hebrews 12, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith. And now the author is not talking about us in this room. He's actually talking about all the believers that have gone before us, that somehow they are able to experience and witness what we are doing. Let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding the shame. Now he's seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. When my wife and I got married, we moved to Oakland. One thing I wanted to do was to join a boxing gym, because I wanted to learn how to box. I thought that boxers just look so cool, and they're always in shape. And so I signed up for this local gym, and I went there, and I was trying to do all the things they were telling me to do. But there was this one guy who was just different. Like the way he moved, like, I'm like, that's what it's supposed to look like. Do I look like that? I don't think so. And he's just, just like, he's not even doing a lot. But just even, like, even the way he stood, like, it wasn't like, it just looked like you know what you're doing. And then I saw him as he would walk out, he'd like shadow box for a while, hit the bags, and then he would walk around just both hands in the air. And he'd just walk around. He'd just walk around. It's like, I'm like, what is he doing? That's not in my training manual. Like, what is that? And I realized he's not only training to fight, he's training to win. He's practicing winning. He's got a vision in his mind of after the fight, his arms being raised. Like he walk around like, I'm the best. I'm the best. And I'm next to him, you're the best. You're the best. Right? Like he had a vision of winning. And that vision of winning, like for me, I'm like, I would seriously be in there. And like sometimes there's like 20-second sprints, right? We're just hitting the bags for 20 seconds. And I'm like, sometimes I'd be like, why am I doing this? But in his mind, he knew why. It's because I'm the best. He wanted his hands raised. He had a vision that was worth enduring the suffering because there was a joy in his vision. My vision was, I can't wait till this is done. I'm going to go home. There's some ice, hopefully a pizza. I'm going to lean back. That's the difference between a hobbyist and a professional. But he had a vision. My question for you is, what is your vision? If you had a vision for what God was doing in your life, what God wanted for your life, you would say, that there are things that you're holding on to, you'd be like, I'm done with that. But when you don't have a vision, a lot of times the question that will come up is, why am I doing this? Why? But when you have a vision of what God has for you, it's easy to let go of the things that entangle you. You know, there's a quote that says, our vision for the future should be so clear that people actually think we're talking about the past. Our vision of the future should be so clear that people think you're actually describing the past. But myself included, many of us, when we think about the future or a vision, it's not very clear at all. But it says Jesus, for the joy set before him, endured the cross and scorned the shame. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding his shame. Now he's seated at the right hand of God. And the joy that Jesus saw, it talks about it later in Hebrews at the end. He talks about that there's something called the mountain of joy, the city of joy, or the city of Zion. He says where angels are rejoicing and the people of God are assembled. That's what he saw. He wasn't on the cross and just like, these nails, the pain. On that cross, he saw a vision, the mountain of joy, the people of God. Now, I'm more of a sprinter. I don't know if you can tell. Well, I said more of a sprinter. I didn't say I'm a sprinter. I'm more of a sprinter than a marathoner. Is that a word? A long distance person. I run short distances because I'm short. It's like I'm compact, so I'm really good in the sprint. If you got to keep running, then it's over, right? And so I'm more of a sprinter. So something that I had to learn as I'm trying to get back in shape and run is endurance, right? How to have endurance. And in the scriptures, when they talk about endurance, they talk about not being swayed, being steadfast. And how do we do that? It says we fix our eyes on Jesus. Now, if you don't have a vision for your future, right? Because that's a big question. I mean, a lot of us get lost right there. We're like, I don't know. That was me. What's your vision for your future? I hope maybe, and it all kind of starts sounding the same. Get married, have kids, buy a house, car, go on vacations. I mean, it all starts kind of sounding the same. So that question, what is the vision for your life? If you don't have a vision, make Jesus your vision. It says, fix your eyes on Jesus. That's how you have the endurance. Fix your eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. In verse 3, it says, think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people. Then you won't become weary and give up. Wait, I've been weary. I've given up. How do we combat that weariness? It says it right there. If you think of all the hostility that he faced and went through. Now, I'm like, Jesus, when you and I talk, I never think about the stuff you went through because I'm like, you're God, you're in heaven. I just tell you about all the stuff I'm going through. But it says when you think about what he endured and what he went through, that will actually give you the endurance and encouragement that you need. After all, you have not yet given your lives in your struggle against sin. Some scriptures even say you haven't resisted to the point of shedding blood. Wait, what? It gets worse? I remember hearing the news one time. It was maybe 2015. And on the news, there were a group of Coptic Christians. They're a group of people in Egypt who have been believers since the first century. We're in the 21st century now. Since the first century, almost 2,000 years ago, this line has been unbroken of people who heard the gospel directly from people who saw Jesus. They received it, and from generation to generation, for almost 2,000 years, they carried on the gospel. And they're still living in Egypt today. These Coptic Christians, they're a religious minority, often persecuted. In 2015, I came across a short article. It wasn't in the mainstream news, of 21 men who had been captured by a militant group, and they had been beheaded for their faith. And later, another news crew went in there to talk to the families, and they said they were interviewing the wives and the fathers and the mothers, and they said, when we first heard the news, we were worried and we prayed that God would save them. And when we heard that when they were beheaded, we were crushed, we were mourning, we were devastated. He says, but then they unexpectedly gave us a gift. They released the video of the beheadings. He said, but what they didn't realize was what they thought would bring us pain brought us peace and brought us joy. Because one by one, we saw our husbands, our sons, our fathers kneeling. And they said, I refuse to denounce him. And their lives were taken. And the next one, I refuse to denounce him. Take my life, Jesus. Beheaded. I refuse to denounce him. Into your hands I commit my spirit. Beheaded. And they said, watching that actually gave us peace and joy, that they had a vision of Jesus where they refused to deny him, even to the point of shedding their blood. There's a story in the scriptures of a man named Stephen, where he was also a first century Christian. And he was approached by men in a synagogue, and they wanted to debate about Jesus. And as they're debating, they can't win this debate, so they start to make lies about him. And they say, oh, he made blasphemous statements about Moses, our prophet, that was punishable by death. And so Stephen, as he is defending himself, all of a sudden looks up to heaven, and he sees the heavens open, and he sees Jesus standing at the throne of God. And he says, I see Jesus standing at the throne of God. And at this, the people literally cover their ears, they drag him out, and they start to stone him. There's a quote I heard one time. My friend was giving a talk, and I thought it was so profound. He said, I cried that I had no shoes until I saw a man who had no feet. And I think for a lot of my life, that worked. I could always think of someone worse off than me. No matter how low I was, I could think of someone who was lower. But then there came a point where I started to think about the man with no feet. How does this person now elevate themselves? Do they need to find someone who's worse off than them? And if they found such a person, how does that person feel better? Do they find someone worse off than them? And so on. But Stephen, in this moment, as he's being stoned and dragged to his death, he doesn't see a vision of hell opening up and say, at least I'm not there. These stones are not so bad after all. No, what does he see? He sees a vision of heaven opening up, and he sees Jesus standing at the right hand. Now, almost everywhere in the scripture, so far as I know, Jesus is seated at the right hand. But on this picture, this vision, he sees Jesus is standing. He's a king. Kings don't stand, but he is standing. As he sees Stephen about to cross over, Jesus is standing. I know for those other 21 believers, Jesus was standing. And I want to live my life in such a way that as I'm crossing over, I'm like, Jesus, did I live in a way where you are standing to embrace me as I come? I want to have a vision of my life where I will live in such a way that no matter what I endure, I can face it with the joy set before me. That's the picture I have, that Jesus will be standing when I meet him. Scripture says, and have you forgotten the encouraging words God spoke to you as his children? My child, don't make light of the Lord's discipline, and don't give up when he corrects you. I'm a teacher. I see students so many times where when I try to correct them, the moment I start to correct them, something has happened in their spirit where they just shut down. They give up. I'm even giving a gentle correction and something in them just, whew. It says, my child, don't make light of the Lord's discipline. Don't brush it off. Don't give up and shut down when he corrects you, for the Lord disciplines those he loves. And he punishes each one he accepts as a child. His discipline is actually a sign that he loves you. I've got students. So many of them are knuckleheads. So many times I'm like, I wish I didn't see that. I saw it. Oh, did I see that? Yes, I did. It's like, since I saw it, now I've got to say something. I've got to do something. I can't just turn a blind eye. And sometimes they're like, Mr. O, just ignore us. Just let us. I'm like, I can't, because I actually care about you. You're my student. It's so much easier for me to be like, I didn't see it and just ignore it. But I care about you. When God disciplines us, it's not just punishment, it's correction. He's teaching us to go the right way. When God rebukes you, our response should be, thank you, God. I was going the wrong way. I thought it was the right way. I was so blind to it. But when you correct me, God, you're actually showing me the right way. You are saving me because you love me. But my question is, can God speak to you? Who can speak to you? Who can disagree with you? Who can tell you what they think the truth is? And what's your response? With Stephen, they covered their ears, they silenced his voice. It's easy for me, like when in my earlier years of marriage, my wife would say some things I didn't like, and I was just so used to being defensive, I would immediately start trying to discredit her, making excuses. I say, and here's the old classic, but what about you? Right? It's like, but what about you? Can you listen when God is speaking to you? God's discipline is freedom. To the immature, discipline feels restrictive, but to the mature, it is freedom. Later on in the scriptures, it says, see to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? At that time, his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, once more, I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. That student who gave me such a hard time, man, I hope I run into him again. He's probably still in Oakland. He would always end up in my wife's office because she was the principal. And he'd get in trouble, get sent to the office. And at our school, there was a growing contingent of Muslim students who had come from Yemen. And we opened up a room for them to pray. So they'd say their prayers throughout the day. They would go and they would come back. And I was curious, like, hey, what are you guys doing in there? So during lunch, I would come around and ask them, like, hey, how was your prayer? So like, it was good. And I was like, so tell me about it. Like, what do you do? And they're like, pray. I'm like, yes, obviously. But what are your prayers like? Like, what do you say? And they just looked at me like I was an idiot. And they're just like, the prayers? I'm like, oh, okay. So like, what do you mean by the prayers? Like, do you talk to God and do you share about your day? And they're like, you infidel. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, we say the prayers. And then I finally understood, like, oh, like if you came from a Catholic background, like there's liturgies. There's like written prayers that people recite and memorize. And they're like, we have our prayers. They're prayers that we've memorized. We say them. When we're done, we come back. And I was like, oh, it's great. And does anything else ever happen? They're like, no, we just say our prayers and then we're done. I was like, all right, great. So this kid who gave me such a hard time was also one of these boys. And one day he ends up in Aaron's office. And he's talking with Aaron. And somehow this topic of prayer comes up again. And, she's asking the same questions. What do? We pray. It's like, oh, when you pray, is there anything you say? No, we say the prayers. So you tell them about you? No, we memorize them. We say, so you recite them. Yes. And then Aaron shared something with him. She said, whenever I'm in a conversation with someone who I think is very important, I actually listen more than I speak. And he was actually like, huh. And she said, I wonder next time if after you're done with your prayers, you sat there and you waited to see if God speaks. Now, I think you kind of took a risk here, right? Because maybe we shouldn't have been talking about this. It's like, but he opened it up. And so he was like, okay, maybe. And then he just goes about his day. A couple days later, he's like, Ms. O, I need to talk to you. Now, she sees so many kids throughout the day. She doesn't know what he's talking about. And she's like, oh, you're in trouble again? What happened? And he's like, I did that thing you said to do. She's like, what do you mean? It's like, the prayers. It's like, went in my room at home. I was praying. After I was done, I was like, oh, okay, God. If you want to say anything, I'm listening. He said, nothing happened. And then I heard a voice, and it creeped me out because it said in English, I'm his prophet. And he said, it scared me. He said, I was so scared, Ms. O. I was so scared. And I was so scared. And then he said, but then I heard another voice. And this voice scared me too. But it shouted. He said, but I heard it in Arabic. And it said, I am his son. And he said, my room shook. And so I ran out of my room and I saw my brother. And I said, hey, did you feel that? There was an earthquake. And he said, my brother's like, no, you tripping. You smoking. His brother was my student that year. And he said, so I went to my mom and my dad, and I said, Mom, Dad, there was an earthquake. Did you feel that? There was an earthquake. They're like, no, son, there was no earthquake. He just went back into his room, and he was just like sitting there stunned, and he was just like, I need to talk to Ms. O. So he said, so what do I do? And Aaron's sitting there like, that's a lot. And she was like, okay, how do I help this child connect the dots? And so she said, who do you think that was? Now, this boy comes from a very devout Muslim family, but one of his friends at school invited him to a Chinese Bible study. And his parents maybe thought it was just Chinese study. I don't know. They said go. So he'd been going for a couple weeks to a Bible study at a Chinese church. They spoke in English though. And so he looks at her and Aaron goes, who do you think that was? And she's just praying, God, reveal yourself. And he just looks at her, oh, Ms. O, obviously Jesus. And she's like, oh, how do you know this? And he's like, because Bible study, they always say Jesus is the Son of God. And the voice said, I am his son. It has to be Jesus. He's like, but I'm Muslim. And now I don't know. But my family's still Muslim. So what do I do? I think Aaron was just really wise. She didn't tell him what to do, except to say, don't stop listening to the voice. God has such a heart for all people and the Middle East. There's stories like this all over Yemen, all over Jordan, all over Iran. There's so many people who are having visions and encounters. Sometimes it's just a man in white. They call him the man in white, a vision, clothed in white. And then they've come to find out that is Jesus. He's revealing and showing himself. And when he speaks, the earth shakes. I'm going to read it again in Hebrews. It says, at that time, his voice shook the earth. But now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. If your life is being shaken right now and you feel like I'm so unstable, my job, my career, my mind feels shaken and unstable. If that's you, it's not just that it's shaking. Maybe God is also speaking. God is speaking. When God speaks, things shake, but they shake so that what may be unshaken remains. God, I pray that you shake what needs to be shaken. God, let everything that I've been holding on to so closely fall off so that anything that remains can no longer be shaken. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. This upcoming week, take some time to fix your eyes on Jesus. You don't need to say much. Just fix your eyes on Jesus. Create space. What does God want to say? God, you're more important. I want to hear what you have to say. What will God put in your heart, a thought in your mind? Is there anything you need to let go of that you've been holding on to? Is there anything that God has already called you to be obedient in that you've been resisting? You know, the scriptures say that blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. In Hebrews, it also talks about without holiness, you cannot see God. The scripture ends by saying God is a consuming fire. But it's not a fire that's going to burn you. When you step into God's consuming fire, he burns all the things away that are unholy, impure, until only you remain the way he created you. If our praise team can come up. Is it possible to sing that last song like the chorus of the bridge? I'm looking at you, Ronnie. Okay, you're saying yes. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Let's just take a moment here. Let's fix our eyes on Jesus together here. God, would you come and speak? Would you come and speak? We're going to respond to what you've spoken in worship and praise. And we'll just take a little moment of silence afterwards just to create space for you, God. And even if we don't hear audible voice, we're just practicing the discipline of creating space for you. So Jesus, we fix our eyes on you. You are seated in heaven. May we live in such a way that we live as courageous as you. God, if there's anyone here who feels like their life is being shaken right now, God, would you also let them know that you are speaking into their life and their situation? If there's anyone right now that's holding on to the weight and the sin that easily entangles, Jesus, would you show them a vision of their life and who you are so that those things would be so much easier to just cast aside and lay down? God, would you bring us into your consuming fire until the things that we desire are what you desire? Jesus.